My paper is Women's Issues, Acknowledging Reality or Reinforcing Hierarchy. The so-called Mumsnet election of 2010, women were viewed as a vital constituency. All the parties targeted their votes, and they were attempting to demonstrate empathy with working mums or concern for children's futures. And upon first appraisal, this can seem a acknowledgement of female politicisation, and so the concept of electoral women's issues may appear to be a feminist victory, but this doesn't actually stand up to scrutiny. First, it's important to draw a distinction between issues which must, for biological reasons, primarily concern women, such issues as abortion, certain types of healthcare screening, and responding to attacks on women as women, such as the comments by the Canadian police officer that sparked the worldwide protest Slut Walk, and what I call electoral women's issues. And these are those that could in fact concern either sex, but which politicians and the media have insisted are only the concern of women. And these are issues usually surrounding, for example, childcare, parental issues. And for the sake of brevity, I'm going to focus on the UK. So, women as a constituency. Women are not a unified, homogenous group. We constitute roughly 50% of the electorate, and we are, like men, divided along ethnic, class, cultural, ideological and professional lines. And so whilst many women will worry about women's electoral issues such as child benefit, as students, workers and unemployed citizens, we also have other priorities, and in fact our views often clash. No one woman or even group of women can claim to speak for women. Pandering to patriarchy, contemporary women's movements. Women's movements focused on electoral women's issues tend to play to the stereotypes prevalent within the patriarchal capitalist system, either that of activist motherhood or women as predominantly sexual beings, as is already seen a lot in mainstream society. To demonstrate the adoption of these stereotypical identities in contemporary third-wave feminism and women's movements, let us examine two different case studies. Mumsnet is an example of activist motherhood. It explores the idea of women as, amongst other things, political agents. It does so, however, through the lens of traditionalism, depicting mothers as the bearers of children first and not as women. As Asher highlights in Shattered, Modern Motherhood and the Illusion of Equality, the tone adopted by male politicians towards Mumsnet was actually extremely patronising, and the fact that they welcomed this dialogue really served to cement the aforementioned stereotype, which caters to the equally chauvinistic depiction of women as primarily sexual beings, is Slut Walk. It should be noted that this movement responded to the first type of women's issues mentioned, the ones concerning biological and attacks on women. The comments which prompted this global phenomenon, were aimed at women as a gender. And so whilst these activists should be congratulated for opposing victim-blaming rape culture and highlighting that it is continually influential, their method of protest was unhelpful. Women waving banners proclaiming "this is what a slut looks like," whilst dressing in a way which patriarchal men view to be slutty, does not actually attack patriarchy, it rather reinforces the attitudes of such men. And as O'Keefe highlights, these movements also fail to examine the links between patriarchy and other forms of oppression.
In the last decades in Europe, the language of extreme politics has excelled in using immigration as a new firewood to fuel the flames of nationalism. There is more to the rise of the far right in Europe, though, than the votes won and seats gained in parliaments and cabinets. In a review of several recent books dedicated to the far-right parties in Europe, Anthony Salinas encourages future research to focus more on their policy influence that could prove, in his words, even more alarming than the far-right's electoral performance. Following this line of inquiry, I am concerned with the way far-right ideas have infiltrated European mainstream politics and translated into concrete policies. focusing in particular on the veil ban that has swept recently across Europe. I will begin with a brief description of the law and the key debates surrounding it that relate its argumentation to the type of message spread by far-right politicians. I follow the way the centre is engaging in the same discourse commonly used by the far-right and explore the link between the far-right's position on the veil issue and the subsequent government initiatives using the cases of four countries: France, Belgium, Italy and the Netherlands. In the end, I consider the wider implications of this policy for the perception of Islam in Western European societies. In practice, France was the one that took the lead with a law prohibiting the covering of the face in public that came into force in April 2011, followed by Belgium in July the same year. In August 2011, Italian Parliament Committee passed a draft bill, while in the Netherlands, the ban was part of a deal to form a coalition government in the autumn of 2011. The particular social group that falls within the scope of the law and respectively is subjected to the ban are veil-wearing women of Muslim origin. The arguments underpinning its implementation range from gender equality, secularism, assertion of national identity and values of citizenship, to a matter of public security and a measure against extremist behavior. The tone of this campaign corresponds to the common characteristic exhibited in far-right platforms across Europe, the notorious preoccupation with immigration and especially immigrants of non-European Muslim origin that has framed their presence as a threat. To this end, the behavior of the centre-right has been instrumental in legitimizing aspects of the far-right agenda. In the four cases where the implementation of the veil ban has been either realized or strongly considered, France, Belgium, Italy and the Netherlands, it was a centre-right party head of the government and a strong far-right presence on the political scene. Previous research has shown that in countries where the far-right has had electoral potential over the last decade, the centre has sought to capitalize on its votes and strengthen its position by achieving a greater cohesion on the right side of the political spectrum. In doing so, it has acknowledged concerns raised by the far-right, namely immigration, crime, welfare, abuse, among others, and once in office, it has carried out policies and programs consistent with the views expressed by the far-right. At the heart of it stands one particular object, the veil. If the meaning of an object is considered a social construction, in the context of the law, the veil wearing has been identified as a part of the traditional Islamic bonds that subordinate women, and further evoke the image of the burqa-covered body of the Afghan woman that became the symbol for the oppression of the women under the Taliban rule. Thus, the social construction of veiling unpacks in a negative association with gender inequality, Islamic extremism and disrespect for the core values European societies are based on, and it therefore projects these onto Islam in general. The practical reach of the law is actually quite limited, as estimates in the countries reveal that a very small number of women wear a full veil in reality. In this sense, its conception and implementation are a political statement of a far-right character, conveying a negative perception of the Muslim presence in Europe. The electoral appeal of the far-right parties either openly or indirectly compelled the centre to enter their discursive sphere and develop respect for their concerns. The law in focus here is highly significant for European political dynamics, as it touches on the soft issues of culture, identity and values, and thus indicates that the concept of immigrants as a threat is expanding its content and legitimacy under far-right influence. The veil ban legitimizes in the eyes of the public a theme that is in essence part of a wider, discriminatory, Islamophobic discursive practice.